Hey everyone, my name is Rachel and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in April. I read so many amazing books in the month of April. I did read a lot of series though, so I did read a lot of books, but a lot of them ended up being in the same series, so this wrap up might be a little bit shorter than my other ones. April was a super interesting reading month for me. I reread some of my favorites, I discovered a new favorite series, I figured out that horror is not for me. Like we did a lot this month. I do just want to say, disclaimer, I've said this in like so many videos lately, but I thought I would be better by now and my voice still sounds kind of strange because I was sick. I'm pretty much over my sickness at this point, but my voice is just still not quite back to its normal self. So this is just what we're working with, so I will hopefully sound better and back to my normal self in my next video. Before we get started, please make sure to like and subscribe for bookish content from me every single week. Make sure to follow me on Goodreads and Instagram. All of that will be linked down below. All right, so this month I did read 13 books and I DNF'd 2 books. So very interesting month. I'm going to start with the books that I DNF'd. Okay, so the very first book that I DNF'd in the month of April was Fortuna Sworn by KJ Sutton. I had high hopes for this book, not like too high, because some of my friends were giving it like 3 or 4 stars, but I was like, you know what? This could just be a cute little fae fantasy romance. Like I'm not expecting it to change my life or anything, but I was hoping that I would enjoy it enough to continue on with it. I unfortunately only got to the 20% mark before I just had to put it down. Fortuna Sworn follows a character named Fortuna Sworn. She is a type of creature called a nightmare. I'm still not entirely sure what that is. She lives in a human realm, I believe. Her brother gets kidnapped by some other magical creature, and she's always been looking for him, but then finally a mysterious fae comes to her and says, hey, I can help you find your brother, but you have to marry me in order to come to the place where I think your brother is. So you have a marriage of convenience, kind of enemies to lovers, and then I believe Fortuna has to sort of compete in trials to get her brother back. I don't know for sure though. As I said, I only made it to the 20% mark of this book. It did have a lot of promise. The cover's really beautiful. I was hoping that I would love it because I really wanted to buy the physical book, but the reason that I DNF'd this was it read like, it's definitely an adult fantasy. There are darker themes that are talked about and just like very mature things going on in this book, but it read like very young YA, particularly the main character. I think she's supposed to be like at least 18 at the minimum, but I do think she's in her 20s, but she was very whiny and annoying and she read super young to me, and I just like that disconnect between the very mature, you know, adult themes in the book and then her just being kind of younger and annoying. And I like YA, don't get me wrong, but when YA skews too young and the main character is immature and making stupid decisions and just like, you know, I don't really like that, and I felt like that is what this book was. It did not work for me, so I decided to put it down and I have no regrets. Okay, the other book that I did DNF this month is Desperate Measures by Katee Roberts. How do I talk about this book eloquently? My parents do watch these videos. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know, and that's fine. You don't need to know. I decided to give this book series a shot. If you don't know, Katee Roberts has a sort of like Disney villain spicy novella series, and it's really popular here on BookTube. A lot of people like it, and I have never read a book like that before, and I just wanted to give it a shot, see what it was all about. So I picked up the first book in the series, Desperate Measures, which was a Jafar and Jasmine kind of retelling. And I went in totally open-minded, excited to see what it was all about. And I will say, in the beginning when it first started, I was excited. I was like, oh, this is fun. Like, I've never read a book like this. I was into it. I was like, you know what? We're just gonna have a silly, goofy time. I'm going to read this, have fun, and like probably rate it 3 stars, whatever. I enjoyed it in the beginning, but then it was literally just that over and over and over again. Like, and I know that that's the purpose of these novels. Like, I totally understand this is a purposeful thing that Katee Roberts does. This is what these novels do. Hopefully you guys get what I mean. Like, I'm just trying to say this in a way that's like, you know, good for everyone to hear. It just wasn't my thing. I did enjoy it in the beginning, but then I'm just somebody who needs a little bit more plot, and these books definitely are light on the plot. That's okay. It's just not for me. I kind of just got bored and was like skimming through those sections eventually, and then I was like, why am I even reading this? Like, it was also 3 a.m. when I was reading this, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? I am skimming a spicy novella at 3 a.m. Like, how have we got to this place, Rachel? I decided to put it down, and I just don't think that that type of book is for me. Don't get me wrong, I love spice. It's vital in a romance for me, but I just need a bit more build up, a bit more tension, and a bit more plot. So unfortunately, I did end up DNFing Desperate Measures. Okay, so now let's talk about the books that I did actually read this month. So the very first book that I read this month was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah Janet Maas. I had such a good time rereading this book. I have read the entire A Court of Thorns and Roses series once before. It is like top 3 favorite series of all time for me, and I read this book in one sitting. I was so shocked. I did not think that would happen, but as soon as I started it, I could not put it down. What's really great about rereading the ACOTAR series is, as I did read it a year ago, I remember obviously the big points, but I don't remember the details, and that is where I just I fell in love so much more with this series because I got to relive the details again. I got to relive the small intricacies that happen in this book in the next book that I'm going to talk about. So if you do not know, I talk about this book series all the time, and I realized I never explained it, but it is just a fantasy romance series. It starts out as a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It very heavily deviates from there, but follows a girl named Feyre living in the human world. Her and her family are struggling to survive. While hunting, she ends up killing a wolf who actually turns out to be a fae. Another fae comes from the fae realm and tells her hey, because you killed, this important person to us, you can either die or you can come and live with me in the fae realm forever. That's where the Beauty and the Beast aspect comes in, and she decides to go with this fae and live in his lands, and then just 1,000 other things happen. It's such a comfort series for me. The characters in this series mean so much to me, and I just had such a good time rereading this. I think the first time around I read this, I gave it 4 stars. I did give it 5 stars the second time around. I do think that this is the weakest book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. Just, it's the first book in the series, that tends to happen, but I still loved it and really appreciated so many things about this book that I did not appreciate the first time around. And then the next book I read following ACOTAR was, of course, the sequel, A Court of Mist and Fury. This one was especially incredible to reread. Oh my gosh. This is potentially Sarah J. Maas's magnum opus. I'm not quite sure yet. We shall see. But I absolutely loved this so much more. And it was genuinely more fun, more intense, more everything the second time around. I was sort of worried when I was rereading this series, am I gonna feel that magic again? Am I going to feel the things that I felt the first time I read it? And I felt things even more, and I grew to appreciate this series so much more, which I didn't even know was possible because I can't shut up about this series. I won't talk too much about what happens in this book because it is a sequel, but this book changed the game, and I appreciated so much about it. Oh my god, I cried so many times at the weirdest times when I was reading this book. I cried when we met the inner circle for the first time. Just that very first introduction scene. Nothing emotional happens. It felt like coming home. You know what I mean? I know that is the nerdiest thing ever, but truly reading this book and seeing my favorite characters again was coming home, and I felt so comforted by that. When we meet Cassian and Azriel for the first time, when we actually get to know more a lot better, when Cassian told us backstory, I cried. There's that line where Feyre says to Rhys, "Where are we going?" And Rhys says, "To Valaris, the city of starlight." Oh my god, I have chills. And I want to tear up. That means so much to me. That one line represents so much to me, represents just this whole fictional fantasy world that I crave and love so much. So rereading this was an experience. It was an emotional journey that I went on, and I just absolutely loved every second of it. As I said with ACOTAR, I definitely obviously remembered the big moments in this book, but I didn't remember the little moments which make this book so much better. Even just those really small scenes of the inner circle and Feyre walking around Valaris, or Azriel, Cassian, and more going out dancing, and then they're all hungover the next day. That, oh my gosh, it just means so much to me. I don't know. I can't explain it. This book is just everything. And it was also really interesting to pay attention to details that I didn't the first time around. The way that Feyre described, particularly meeting Amren and Azriel, it definitely gets my spidey senses tingling, for some things that I'm sure will be revealed in future ACOTAR books, because particularly the way she talks about Azriel and Amren is that they're both very different. We know that Amren is different, obviously, and we don't know what she is, and I really hope that we find out what she is soon, but she also talks about Azriel in a very interesting way, and I just cannot wait to get to his book. I need to know his whole backstory and what his whole deal is, and I loved this so much. Oh, and also, so I love Nesta. If that makes me a villain, so be it. I love Nesta, and she was so badass in this book when she was yelling at the human queens on behalf of the inner circle and Feyre. I love her, and just the tension between Nesta and Cassian in this book is so good. I loved this so much. I obviously gave it 5 stars. This is another, I think I gave this book 4 stars the first time around, which feels disgusting at this point. Like, I'm horrified that I ever gave this book anything lower than 5 stars. But yeah, it's a very, very strong 5-star and definitely one of my favorite books of all time. Okay, the next book that I read in April was The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. This is another fantasy romance. It is marketed as enemies to lovers. So this book follows our main character, Lara. She is raised to be kind of like this warrior princess assassin. Once she is of age and ready to fight, she is married off to a rival kingdom's prince. They will become king and queen of his land, Ithacana. Lara has been under the impression that this rival king's land has sort of been oppressing her kingdom, but once she gets to the kingdom, marries this prince, they become king and queen. She isn't able to assassinate him quite yet, and she starts to realize that maybe they're not the bad guys, maybe where she came from is the bad guys. This book had a lot of high hope, had a lot of promise. This is kind of a fantasy romance staple. I feel like whenever people recommend fantasy romance, this book always comes up. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I was pretty disappointed with it. The biggest thing is I just feel like the romance was really, really lacking. I think that character development and getting to know our characters and just like having that tension between our 2 characters in a fantasy romance is vital, and I felt none of that. I feel like Lara and then Aron, who was the prince, didn't even really spend too much time together in this book. I feel like they could have spent way more time together. We could have got so much more payoff of them kind of having to be in forced proximity, but even though they're living in the same house, they're married now, she's supposed to kill him, all of these things, they really kind of did their own thing, and then when they were together, they were just kind of like neutral. I also feel like Aron, his character was not developed very well at all. I sort of feel like he was just there, and I really, really wish that we got more from both of them. I wish that we got more character development and more time together. There was also a lot of focus on the politics in this fantasy world, which I can appreciate. I am not super big on political fantasy, or I at least want to know like that's what I'm going into. This is very much marketed as like the perfect enemies to lovers fantasy romance, and I would say that that is false. They're not even really enemies like they're supposed to be on paper, but like they're fine. They're so neutral when they talk to each other, and I just think that the political aspect really overshadowed anything else. So if you do like political fantasy, I would pick this up. The romance is really not that big of a thing, in my opinion. I could see myself continuing on with the series. I believe that there is a sequel and then like a spin-off following other characters in the future, so I might pick up the next book in the series, The Traitor Queen, eventually, but it's just not going to be like something I rushed to do because this just sort of fell flat for me. So now we need to talk about the Zodiac Academy series. Basically, I had a lot of plans, you know, to read a lot of different books this month. And one of those books was the first book in the Zodiac Academy series, The Awakening, and I did read that kind of towards the beginning of the month. So I did put this book on my April TBR as like a maybe. I figured I might pick this book up. I wasn't really sure, but then I think I like started talking to Hannah from Hannah's Recent Reads pretty shortly after I made that TBR video, and I believe she was already reading Zodiac Academy and she was loving it, and she and I have very, very similar tastes. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna read it. And Hannah is literally the Zodiac Academy ambassador, their campaign manager, like I don't know, like she is getting everyone to read it, and I'm so glad that she sort of like inadvertently convinced me to read it as well, because I am obsessed with this series. So the first book is The Awakening. This follows Tori and Darcy Vega. They are 18-year-old twins, and they live in Chicago, and they live a really, really rough life. They are orphans. They are struggling to survive. They kind of have to resort to petty crime to just make ends meet. And one day, a mysterious man comes to them and convinces them that they need to come with him because they are actually the heirs to a Fae throne in another realm called Solaria. They're obviously like, what the hell? What are you talking about? But they kind of have nothing to lose, and they realize that their life in Chicago is just not that great, so they go with him. He also tells them that they need to attend the Zodiac Academy to hone their skills and figure out how powerful they are because they do have magic. This is all very shocking to them, but they go along with it anyway. Once they get to the Zodiac Academy, they meet 4 heirs of the Celestial Council. So Tori and Darcy find out that their parents were the King and Queen of Solaria, but were killed in a fire when they were babies, and so in their place, 4 sort of like counselor celestial people have been ruling over Solaria, and their children, these 4 men, I believe they're like 20, they are preparing to take the throne from their parents eventually. But with the return of Tori and Darcy to the Zodiac Academy and to Solaria, that does threaten their ability to take the throne as they had always planned. Nobody really wants these very untrained, with very little knowledge, Fae who have been living in the human world to take over the throne, even though it is their rightful place. So the celestial heirs basically make Tori and Darcy's life living hell at Zodiac Academy to try to get them to leave. And Tori and Darcy also find out that they are incredibly powerful. Obviously, their parents were the king and queen of Solaria, so this was expected, but they're way more powerful than they ever thought that they would be, and they end up being a bit of a challenge for the heirs to compete against. Now, everything I just said is scratching the surface. This series is wild. This series goes in so many different directions. We have so many frustrating characters, lovable characters, characters that you will like change your feelings on. It's a lot. It's an emotional ride. So as I said, the first book is The Awakening, and a lot of people said writing in the series isn't great, like you have to push through this book, you have to. So I was very wary going into this book. I was very nervous and like didn't really know how I would react to the writing. While I do understand what people say when they say that the writing is cringy, it didn't really bother me because I loved the plot so much. Like I was fine. So your threshold for writing is going to be different than mine, but I was totally fine, and I really do recommend this series. However, it is a bully fantasy romance, and I do not use that description lightly. So definitely be somebody who is okay with bully romance. I know that there's a lot of bully romance like in the contemporary genre. Like I know Penelope Douglas has a lot of bully romance books. So definitely not a new concept, but just be aware going into this that this is pretty intense. There's some really shocking things that happen throughout the entire series. The bully romance aspect of this book series does not bother me. I didn't know how I would feel when I started it. I am just somebody who I read for entertainment, I read for escapism. I am not going to apply real world morals to what these characters are doing in this fantasy novel. They are vampires, they are werewolves, they are dragons, etc. Like it's too, I suspend my belief so much more for everything else in this novel, so I can't help but also do it for just like the ridiculous things that happen in this book that go under the bully romance umbrella. But just something to be aware of. That is just me. I know that some other people really don't like this genre, and I totally understand why, but I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun, and I thought that this book was really good. I gave it 4 stars. Like, I really enjoyed it. I was expecting to maybe give it 3 stars or even 2 stars just because a lot of people did not like the writing style, but I had so much fun with this book. And then pretty much immediately after I finished the first book, I picked up the second book, which is Ruthless Fae. And then the third book in the series, The Reckoning. This is my favorite in the series so far. Oh my god, just so many amazing and beautiful things, but also terribly painful things happen in this book. And this one just like, I love this one so much. I have the fondest memories of reading this one. And then I read Shadow Princess, and this is the first book in the series that made me cry. Really just, every single book ends on a cliffhanger, like a really bad cliffhanger, and like Caroline and Suzanne, they do not pull punches, you know? They go there horribly. They go there in the worst way, and I was crying really bad after I finished this book, and it was a lot, but I still really enjoyed this. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I did give The Reckoning, the third book, 5 stars, and I gave this book 5 stars as well. And then I read the 5th book, Cursed Fates. This was the worst. By worst, I mean that in a good way. This was the most painful book in the series. I was not okay when I finished this. I was Kim K ugly crying when I finished this book, okay? Like, this was horrific in the best way. And I am currently reading book 6, and things are still going bad. I'll just give you guys a little teaser there. I am working on a full Zodiac Academy reading vlog for the series, but I did read books 1 and 2 before I started the vlog, so you will only see me reading books 3 through 7 in this reading vlog that will hopefully be out very soon. But I do talk about my feelings more in depth of books 1 and 2, but just so you know, you can get all of like my thoughts spoiler free in my Zodiac Academy reading vlog, which will be out very soon. This book is literal hell, but I loved every minute of it. All right, and then I did participate in Gabby from Gabby Reads and Olivia from Olivia Reads a Latte readathon Spring Fling a Ween, and I did read 2 like horror and thriller books during that readathon. I do have a reading vlog for this as well. The first book I read for that was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, and if you saw that vlog, you already know, I won't belabor it too much, but I basically discovered that I'm just not really a horror person, more specifically not a horror person with gore. This book was very gory, very descriptive, had some body horror that was just too much for me. This book did make me feel physically ill. I did end up giving this book 3 stars though, because Grady Hendrix is a great writer. Like, I loved his writing style. He incorporated humor a lot into his writing style. He just did such a good job at keeping the story moving, and I really appreciated that. It did pain me to give this a 3 star because I wanted to like it so badly. I just couldn't get past the gore and feeling physically sick, and just like, this book was not for me. So I'm glad I read it though, because I've owned this book for a very long time. I see so many people talk about it and give it 5 stars, and I've always been very curious about it. Just wasn't for me, and I probably will be unhauling this book eventually. The other book that I read for Spring Flingoween was The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. I unfortunately gave this book 2 stars. This was so disappointing. I thought I was going to absolutely love this book. This book follows a family of 3 who are at a cabin, like for a little vacation, and basically this group of people come to them and say, hey, the world is ending, it's the apocalypse, and the only way to stop it is for one of you guys to die at the hands of the other. And of course they're like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, what are you talking about? We're not going to listen to that. And the people who come to them try to prove to them that no, actually the world is ending. We have proof, and you know, somebody's got to die, basically. So I think that that's a super interesting premise. In the first 10 to 15% of this book, I was so excited. It was creeping me out. I was feeling kind of like this dread feeling, and I was just like, I was really looking forward to seeing what happened. But basically, after the first initial interaction between these people who came to this family, the novel just declined so much at that point. My biggest complaint about this book is there were no stakes. There was no consequences. There was no like, why should these people listen to you? You're not doing anything to convince them that they should do this, that they should do this crazy, ridiculous thing. They would try to convince the family to kill one another by saying the world is ending, I can prove it. Turn on the news and show that there's like an earthquake in Hawaii and be like, see, apocalypse, end times, it's happening. And the family would be like, earthquakes happen, no. And then they would just kind of be like, all right, fair, you know, but you guys still need to do it. You still need to do it. You still need to kill each other. And it just was like, come on. I don't know. I just thought that this was a very, very ridiculous book. The overall rating on Goodreads is pretty low, but I do see a lot of people give this book 5 stars and were touched by it in a way that I was just not. I just fully felt like the execution of the last like 80% of the book was not very interesting, not done super well, and I'm disappointed, and definitely going to be a contender for my worst book of the year because I just don't even understand. I just don't get this book at all. All right, and the last 2 books that I had the honor of reading this month were Heartstopper Volume 1 and Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. Oh my god, I know that I'm so late to the game on these books, but I'm just not really a graphic novel person. I don't like think about graphic novels. I never think to grab one. They're just not really on my radar. But with the show coming out, I watched the trailer and I was like, oh, this looks super good. I'll definitely watch it. And then I saw everyone's reactions to it and I was like, I need to read the books. Like, I need to know what everyone's talking about and I want to be as emotionally invested as everyone else. And so I did go and pick up the first volume of Heartstopper, and oh my god, I read this during reading sprints with Kara and she loved it. And I was just like, I teared up. I teared up reading this. This is the most like wholesome, beautiful, impactful, like just such a good story. If you do not know, Heartstopper follows Nick and Charlie. Charlie is an openly gay student at his all-boys school and he befriends Nick. Nick and Charlie start to develop a very close friendship and they slowly start to fall in love, and it is just the most beautiful, sweet, and just like fantastic story to read. I really appreciate that Alice Oseman was able to pack in very important topics, very serious matters into a graphic novel so quickly and done so well, and you just felt this like warm, cozy feeling the entire time. I don't know, I'm just so impressed by this, and it definitely makes me want to pick up more graphic novels in the future. I am going to be reading Lore Olympus, I believe, in the month of May because I've heard a lot of good things about that graphic novel. If you have any other recommendations for like romance-based graphic novels, please let me know. But this was such a, as I said, this was like a privilege to read. Like, I feel so lucky that I get to read this book, and I'm so glad that I read both of the novels before I watched the TV show. Definitely recommend doing it that way, and I am really looking forward to reading volumes 3 and 4 very, very soon. All right, guys, so that is it for my April wrap-up. Let me know, what did you read this month? What was your best book that you read in April, and what was your worst book that you read in April? Thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate you. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will catch you guys in the next one.